Ed Arnold, where are you? There he is. Didn't see you behind Bob. This is the first. Ed Arnold has a history with Eyewitness News, as you will know, Channel 7 for a long time. I'm sure, Ed, you don't mind if I say this publicly, has been fighting heart disease for some time now. And for the last 2 to 3 years, he's been writing me every time and saying, I'm sorry, once again, I can't come. And he wrote me recently and said, I'm up and around, I'm feeling well, and I'm going to come to the anniversary show for Eyewitness News. Could you all give Ed Arnold a big hand, please? Heather McKenzie, where are you? It's your turn. Heather's going to introduce us to a couple you all know had a big impact on the photography side of Eyewitness News.
Dave Bussey recently retired after 38 years as a photographer and Eyewitness News. He met his future wife, Mary McCormick, there. And as you can see from the picture on the screen, they had a lot in common. And they still do. Dave and Mary.
I just want to tell a quick story about when I came to Eyewitness News as a 23-year-old news photographer from Louisville, Kentucky. I didn't know a thing about Eyewitness News. And the first thing that happened was I was in Dennis Swanson's office and I sat down and he looks at me, he looks at my resume. First thing he says is, how the hell old are you? And I said, I'm 23. And he says, I got shoes older than you. And he says, but I like your tape. I don't believe you shot it, because I don't think anybody that age could shoot one of those. And you got 90 days to prove me wrong. Second thing is, after that was over, I go downstairs and I said, I want to see how they do Eyewitness News. And I walk into the studio, and the first person who meets me at the door is Gary Sunken in the studio. And I didn't know who he was. And so I walked in, and all of a sudden the music comes up, and there's this mad rush of people, talent on the big Al Primo change for the 5 o'clock news, or for the 6 o'clock. And all of a sudden this guy comes running up to me, and he looks at me, and I said, that's Regis Philbin from the Joey Bishop Show. And he says to me, hey, buddy, I got to be on the air. I don't have a jacket. We're about the same size. Let me borrow your coat. And I take my coat off, and I hand it to him. And he goes and does the thing where they stand there for the first part of the show. And then he walks up, says, yeah, this fits really nicely. And then he gave it back to me. Yeah. You're lucky. Yeah. So the only other thing I'll say, there was some talk earlier about this vision that Al Primo had about family and Eyewitness News establishing this unique family relationship with our viewers. And I never really found that until the second day of the riots, when we were down in very, very scary neighborhoods. And I never felt scared. And the reason I didn't feel scared is because here I was, a white guy in a marked news van, and a lot of people in the neighborhood said, you're okay, you're with Eyewitness News. And that really struck me about the importance in any news gathering operation of diversity from top to bottom. And so that's one of the things that I think Eyewitness News has had from the beginning. So the newsroom was also a good place to meet your wife, but I'll let her talk.
No, stay here. Thank you. So, hi everybody. My name's Mary McCormick. I was one of the first camera women in 1980. I came from the NBC affiliate King TV in Seattle, and there were several women that were hired to do work at the time to become the first minicam engineers in Los Angeles. All of us at the time had actually competed through the National Press Photographers Association with different regions. The Northwest region was Region 11. So when Dennis Swanson said, go to the regions, look for NPPA winners, and hire them for the very first 3 hours of news in Los Angeles. And so at that time, we didn't know each other via face, but we would meet each other, and I remember Dave Klein from San Jose and Dave Bussey out of Louisville. And so we all kind of got to know each other at the time. Ultimately, a couple of those gals actually moved on to become lawyers and brokers and that sort of thing, but I stayed. And it was just a fabulous time. It was an exciting time. I remember the first time I went out and got told that I had to go out to Riverside. And there was this guy out there named Bussey. And so I said, well, you know, I'm shooting, of course, right? So at the time we had two-man crews, and I had come out of building the 60-millimeter film, the library, and had done pretty well in Seattle and had come back. And the first day I came on the job, I ran into Jim Hattendorf on the assignment desk. And he never looked at me very well. He just handed me my assignment and turned to me and said, we'll just see if you're as good as they say you are. Go do this live shot where no one has ever done a live shot out of there before, so you get to do that. So it was quite a baptism by fire. But the day I met Dave, we actually were doing a story, and we had to flip a coin to see who would shoot. And I won. But there's always been this wonderful creative competition. We just celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, so that was really nice. So in the quiet of our home, there's still a lot of competitive jarring, if you will. But I'm very proud to tell you that I was able to take the knowledge that I had from KBC at Channel 7 and Eyewitness News. I went as a vacation relief reporter over to NBC Nightly News out of Burbank, onto PBS, and we are celebrating this year my 30th anniversary of running a multimedia company since I left. And all of the information and the wonderful information and great camaraderie that's been in this room has helped me be successful, so thank you.
Okay, by now you're thinking, all right, this is all great, but this program is going to end at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I got good news for you. I got a 25-page script that Skutsky and I worked up. We're on page 23 with only 2 more speakers to go. And the second to the last, that is Rick Duraeus. Rick Duraeus was 14 years in the LA TV News Wars, 7 years as a weather forecaster at Eyewitness from 90 to 97, and he now keeps the trains and the buses on schedule in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is the PIO of the Transit Authority there. Rick Duraeus.
That picture is not a good one, because in New Mexico, people will see it and they'll say, you look a lot like Bill Richardson. Bill Richardson is not very friendly looking to the females, so that is not good. First of all, I want to thank you so much. Eyewitness News is a unique blend of talent, from management all the way down to the anchor people, to the reporters, to the photographers, to the editors, to the writers. I first came here in 1980, December 1980, from KTLA. So I got to experience people from afar and immediately knew what I was up against, because Channel 7 was the place. But I wouldn't have gotten to LA had it not been for Al Primo, because Al was consulting a station in Utah, and I was there at a college conference, And I asked him if I could have 5 minutes just to talk to him. I was 21 years old. And he gave me 30 minutes. And he was telling me about the concept that you want to make not only the audience be you're the surrogate for the viewer, but also you want to make them feel like family. And so all of those things I took to heart, and sometimes it pissed off the old-fashioned people in news, but within about 2 years I was in Los Angeles. Eyewitness News had a tremendous amount of power at the time. When I first got there, it was already established. And one of my first run-ins, actually, was into the power of Eyewitness News, was a news conference at Parker Center where they were talking about a lady who they were trying to identify. They found her body. And there's these 5 police captains, and I'm there with the crew and this whole thing, and there's Howard Moorhead and Pat Coffey. And they're just sitting there. And about 5 minutes into this news conference, Tawny shows up. Tawny Little, radiant as absolutely can be. It's when you saw her, I mean, it was unbelievable. So she walked in, and they stopped the news conference, and they all got up and said, "Hello, Tawny, how are you?" The people from the Times and from the rest of the TV stations went, "What the hell is this? Wait, where are we, chopped liver?" And they sat down. Tawny asked a question. And then they said, "Would you like to say something? Ask something else." So Tawny asked 3 or 4 more questions. It was Tawny's news conference. We were chopped liver. But then Tawny turns to Howard Moorhead or to Pat Coffey. He pops the tape out. They give it to Tawny, and Tawny leaves. And they all stand up and go, "Goodbye, Tawny." So I'm telling this to Roger Bell years later, and as you all know, Roger's going, that laugh of his. And he says, we kicked him in the ass all the time. One of the great things about Eyewitness News was, for whatever people ever said, and whatever Howard Rosenberg ever said, they had the best photographers and they had the best reporters. Well, thank you. And being competition, it was daunting to be up against them. But one of the things was when we had an earthquake, when we had fires, they would just send everybody there and say, "Okay, now be a reporter and look for the stories with people, the stories of how people are affected." And they'd park the truck. In one case, it was Newport Beach. They parked the truck in the beach. We all would come in there and edit the story and then go after Paul and Harold and Paul Dandridge and the rest of them had done the ad-libbing and had done the round robin. We would come in and do our stories. And it was a great concept because we got to be actual reporters. We got to actually go and find it and earn our keep. So we were in Newport Beach, and I show up with Mike Uhas, and Joe McMahon shows up with David Bussey. And now everybody knows McMahon was maybe the most aggressive reporter ever. And so we're at this place where this trailer park is exploding. The propane tanks are exploding. And I'm doing the live shot, and at some point, because McMahon's photographer, Dave, is in there in the trailer park. And at some point, this thing explodes, and there's red-hot shrapnel, and I went like this to cover myself, and McMahon swipes the microphone. And he would not give it back. He did not give it back. He stayed on for 2 hours, and I told him, "Joe, it's my live shot." He goes, "Yeah, well, it's mine now." So years later, Gene Gleason and I went to see Joe McMahon on his deathbed. He's at his home that he shared with Margaret Radford, and it was right on the beach, and they had him in the front, and he had a view of the ocean. We all had our little say with him, and so I sat down with him, and I grabbed his hand. He grabbed my hand, very tender moment, and I said, "How are you doing?" He goes, "Do you remember that live shot in Laguna Beach where I swiped the microphone?" I said, "Yeah, Joe, I remember. You would never let me have it back." And he goes, "I was a real stinker, wasn't I?" I said, "Joe, you still are a stinker." And it was all I could do not to cry because he still, at that point, still reveled in that. One final thing. We were in Kentucky shooting a story on a family that battled aliens with shotguns in 1955. We were doing this in advance of an ABC miniseries called The Tommyknockers. So I'm with Dave Bussey, and we go to the town of Kelly, Kentucky, and Dave is off shooting something, and I'm in my beautiful teal suit. It's this dark teal suit. I'm so proud of it. I walk up to a lady, and I said, "Ma'am, can I talk to you a moment?" And she starts to cry, sob. And I said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" And she said, "Is Ewan's the Undertaker?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And Dave walks up behind and says, "Everything all right?" And I said, "My God," I said, "she thinks I'm the Undertaker." I said, "Ma'am, I'm a weatherman in Los Angeles." And Dave goes, "Don't worry, ma'am, it's the same thing, Undertaker, weatherman." So whenever you think you're too big for your britches, that kind of stuff comes up. I'm so honored to be amongst such august people, such talent. Old faces that I haven't seen for years, but they're very young and very spirited, and you're the core of Eyewitness News. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for letting me be here, because I wouldn't have missed this for the world, and this is probably going to be the highlight for me for many, many years to come. God bless you. Thank you.
There's a gentleman sitting over here behind my wife named Robert Penfold, a longtime personal friend. He is the bureau chief for the Nine Television Network of Australia, the leading commercial television station network in Australia. And I was there. I worked there. I was his producer part of the time. I was there for 11 years. And we traveled a lot. One time I was in Chicago. Something went wrong, or I needed a feed a piece, or I needed some library. I don't know what it was. So I thought, we were ABC of Phils, so I thought I'll call WLS and ask for the news director. And I got him. And his name is right there. It's Jim Hattendorf. And Jim was just the nicest person. He asked me to come down to WLS, and he did whatever we needed doing. I think it was feeding out some video. Whatever it was, he couldn't have been nicer. We've remained personal friends ever since then. And I'm sure you know his story, which is here on page 24, as soon as I find it. He rose from assignment editor to assistant news director, was at Eyewitness News from 76 to 03, with a 5-year break. In the 80s, as I just told you, at the sister station O&O, WLS in Chicago, Jim Hattendorf.
All right, I know where a few of the bodies are buried. So in 1976, I'm working in San Diego for Pete Noyes. And my old college roommate says, "Hey, Dennis Swanson is working in L.A. Did you know that?" I said, "No. You know, he was a graduate student. I was an undergrad at Illinois. I ran camera on his horrible sports preview show. He was the talent." And so I called him up. Joni Hull answered, the gal who told the guy to jump off the skyscraper in downtown L.A. Do you remember that? And I said, "I don't need a job. I just want to say hello." And he said, "You're in San Diego 2 years. How much do you make, and when can you come to work for me?" And I said, "No, I don't want to work in L.A." So he says, "Well, come up and talk." And so I came up on a Friday afternoon, and I walked in the newsroom and talked around. Randy Roach was the assignment editor, and he was wearing a white muslin shirt with puka beads. And I said, "If that guy can be an assignment editor here, I sure can do that." And so a week later, Dennis calls, and it's a Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, and I'm on the phone. And he's saying, "You know, we really want you to come up here." Pete Noyes comes by and says, "Is that Swanson trying to hire you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Tell him to take the fucking job." I said, "Okay, I'll take the job." And I came to Eyewitness News. Dennis Swanson was probably Severino's right-hand man to make us #1 in the 1970s. In 78 or 79, Sev called us into the newsroom for a meeting and said, "Hey, I just put a promo on the air saying we're the #1 source for news and information in Southern California." And that was a 7-day Arbitron average that nobody paid any attention to. And he said, "Now it's your job to make us #1. And of course we did. Sev left, and Dennis became station manager. And in 1983, they decided that he should go to WLS in Chicago, and that prompted a going away party that we had for him on the lot. Tom Van Amberg said, "What should we do?" I said, "Sports, pretty girls, and the Marine Corps." And that's what we came up with. We had the Marine Corps come. We used to host a Marine Corps seminar. They would send command officers who were going to be big shots to come spend a week with us to learn what news was and how to behave with news people. And, you know, we showed them we were human beings. So they honored him. I had the Laker girls, and I had Playboy bunnies. And you'll see a bunch of you guys. His shirt there on the back says, "Numbers are my game." And he had ARB and Nielsen written on the short sleeves. He went to Chicago. Fahey Flynn had just died. The morning show host had just quit. And so they're looking for a producer for AM Chicago. And Joe Ahern, the station manager and the program director, bring in a tape and said, "Here's a tape of Debbie DeMaio from Baltimore. She's a producer of a show there." And they put the tape in, and of course the rest is history. Dennis says, "Wait, who's the host?" They said, "Oh, that's Oprah Winfrey." And he says, "Hire her." So they hired both Oprah and Debbie DeMaio to come. And I was there in December '83, and Oprah went on the air in January of '84 as the Oprah Winfrey Show, and then it became the Oprah Show, and the rest is history. So all I can say is that Dennis Swanson got promoted by Sev and to news director, and he went to Chicago. In a year and a half, we made it #1. Then he went a couple other places, and then he went to WNBC and made it #1. And whatever he touches turns to gold. So he's a big part of the reason Eyewitness News is what it is today. Okay, thanks.
I'm going to have Steve wrap this up, and then I have a couple things about News Geezers I want to tell you about before you're going to be free to visit and eat and drink and do whatever you want to do, okay? Steve, wrap it up.
Okay, Tim Danson spent 50 years with Eyewitness News, editor and then field photographer. Sheila Suarez is here, longtime editor. Sue Vorgan, one of my fellow writers, and I'm mentioning you because I want you all to watch my closing video very closely. It's a salute to editors, and after that, the legendary newsroom parties. Here's one of our early film editors on the right, Tim Danson. They had to glue every scene together under tight deadlines and hope the splices wouldn't break. In the late 1970s, we finally went to tape. Sheila Suarez had to deal with primitive editing gear that was notoriously inaccurate and hard to operate. Here's a later picture of Sheila taken by Gary Franklin. He was not only a movie reviewer, but an accomplished photographer. The writers looked at the incoming footage in the editing rooms. That's me, sometimes facing a difficult time dealing with a lack of decent video in those primitive early days of ENG. We worked hard, but we also partied hard. This video was taken by Heather McKenzie at one of our infamous ratings victory parties in the newsroom. They turned the lights off, drank, and danced on the desks while ear-splitting music played from giant speakers and amplifiers. They knew I didn't drink, so I was the designated 11 p.m. producer for the night, working in the back room trying to ignore the pounding music in my head. But I was always able to wrap up my work in time to get out and dance on the desks myself. Some of the ceiling tiles are missing. When the party was over, damaged ceiling tiles and particles were all over the floor. Some of the desks had been broken, and it looked like the aftermath of an earthquake. Okay, so it was the golden age, and there were some very good times. So let us officially call it the good old days, even though maybe it wasn't always the good old days. And thank you, Martin Orozco, for this photo of you and Rick Romero. And that's it. This has just been a wonderful experience for me. What can I say? I'll remember it for the rest of my life. And thank you all for coming.
So I haven't asked for any standing ovations, but I'm going to ask for one for the gentleman who put this program together.
Yes.
Steve Skitsky.
speech. I've said it all. Thank you.
For the remainder of 2019, the News Geezers plan lunches on May 4th, August 3rd, and November 2nd, all Saturdays. The venue will continue to be Victorio's Restaurant in North Hollywood. On May 4, we will mark 25 years since the Brown Goldman murders. On August 3rd, the program will focus on the Tate LaBianca murders 50 years ago. The emphasis at both of these lunches will be on the media's role. If you have personal stories regarding the coverage of either the Manson or O.J. Simpson cases, these classic Los Angeles crime stories, perhaps you would like to speak. You can reach me through the contact page on our News Geezers website. That's www.newsgeezers.com. News Geezers lowercase, all one word. This is Bob Tarlow, thanking you for watching this presentation.